On today's episode of Locked On Canadiens, Montreal loses in regulation for the first time in 2 weeks. Is the mix in danger? And why did Kent Hughes do nothing on Friday?
You're Locked On Canadiens, your daily podcast on the Montreal Canadiens, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome into episode 1262 of Locked On Canadiens. Thanks for making us your first listen of the day, for subscribing wherever you get your podcast. Doing that supports the show and ensures you don't miss an episode. We are free and available every day wherever you get your podcasts, including here on YouTube, where I'm just now noticing that Laura and I are on different sides of the screen than we usually are. So that's if you're not watching on YouTube, those are the sorts of visual gags you can come to expect from us at Locked On Canadiens. Laura, how are we doing today?
We're doing great. I thought about just like switching it around as you were talking and just distracting you that way. But we've got a lot to talk about. I think Canadians lost on Saturday night. There were no moves at the trade deadline. I think we really need to talk about it because there's some aspects of the fan base that aren't too happy. And I think we really kind of need to get together and come back down to earth and just chill out a little bit.
Yes, closed door meeting, right? That's what we're going to do here with us and the rest of this fan base. So we'll start there in Calgary. We'll actually work backwards then and head to the trade deadline, which wasn't much of anything for the Montreal Canadiens, and then recap the whole week that was, because it was a pretty eventful one for Montreal, despite the fact that there was nothing in the way of transactions. But let's start Saturday night in Calgary. The West Coast swing for the Canadiens, it's always full of Habs fans wherever they are. It was against Edmonton on Thursday. The same was true against Calgary, and they didn't really get much to look at in that one. A 1-0 shutout loss to the Calgary Flames. And Dustin Wolf, who is surely emerging as one of the top young goaltenders in the National Hockey League, was particularly excellent against the Montreal Canadiens. That game was funny because it started off with the Canadiens playing a pretty uninspired looking brand of hockey. And then towards this end of the second and then into the third, they started to pick it up once they got down a goal. What are your takeaways from that game? Because it was sort of, again, something we've seen from Montreal a lot, a tale of two teams within one game.
So I think we did allude to it, if I'm not mistaken. But Patrik Laine was out of practice because he had flu-like symptoms.
Yeah.
And when I watched the Canadiens in that game, and I know I was not alone on this, I thought about maybe he wasn't the only one with flu-like symptoms, and maybe there's something going around again, because there certainly is. It is after March break in Montreal, and everyone is sick. So I know Patrik Laine doesn't have children, but they're definitely it feels like there's so much around. And so it did feel kind of like maybe the Canadiens were battling not just themselves, but also like a little bit of health issues.
Yeah, I wouldn't put it past them for that to be the case. I also think that once, the way that this team is constructed, especially up front, they don't have a margin for error.
Yes.
So, Laine goes out with an illness on game day, and Michael Pezzetta has to step in. And the only line that really, the only two lines that played a regular-ish shift was the top line, the boy genius line of Suzuki, Caulfield, and Slafkovsky, and the second line, which usually has Patrik Laine on it, but it didn't. And Anderson played up there on most shifts, but everybody took a shift on that line, because this is the thing. Marty has to play Pezzetta in situations like Saturday night, and he doesn't really want to. And that's a real problem for the current construction of the Montreal Canadiens, is that
you can't split the other lines up.
You can't split the other lines up, and you are one injury away from this house of cards collapsing, right? Yes. Like that's Doc is out long term. Okay, like it's not ideal, but he wasn't playing to a level anyway where it's, you're missing him to such a great deal where the difference between him and Owen Beck is that vast. It's big. It's a big difference, but it's not to the level of like, we can't play this guy. Whereas the level of play from like, I don't know, anybody else on the lineup and Michael Pezzetta is quite large. What else in that game to you stood out for why the Canadiens had a hard time generating offense? Especially early on, they had a hard time. They ended up picking it up later, but what was happening in your mind with Montreal in this game?
they looked unprepared, which they really did. They looked like, they looked like game 3 of the season or 4 of the season where like all of a sudden they forgot little things, right? They looked I think they weren't expecting much from Calgary, which, any good team does not play down to their opponent. Good teams should not be doing that. And I think the creativity that we're used to seeing from them was lost. And to me, like, I can't put the blame on any single player or the fact that Patrick Laine wasn't there or that it was Pizzetta or whatever, because, they should be able to win without a single person in the lineup. And
Yeah.
if you look at the score, it was 1-0, right? Like, it's not, and Dustin Wolf too, he's somebody who's getting a lot of chatter about, one of the emerging goaltenders of the future. And he, this whole season, he quietly put up such amazing performances. I think he was the reason Calgary came out of the gate so strongly, right?
Yeah.
Standings. I think, yes, a lot of other people are hitting with their seasons, but he was definitely a big factor. So I think the Canadiens they didn't seem to have a response to that. They didn't seem to be able to be flexible, despite the fact that the lineup was the lines were rapidly being blended.
Yeah, Dustin Wolf is the story of this game, right? Like that from start to finish, he was the guy. I think the one area that he excelled in that I don't think is getting a lot of conversation was how great he was at playing the puck. The Canadiens want to get the puck in deep. They want to get their forecheck going. They want to beat you down low. And every time they chipped the puck in, Dustin Wolf was behind the net stopping it. That stopped a lot of Canadiens rushes or offensive opportunities from getting set up. And this is the challenge that I think we've pointed out about this Canadiens team, is that they have their way that they want to play, and they don't really have the ability to adapt yet, because they're trying to chip it in. Nothing's getting done that way. Okay, well, we have to, that's not working. We have to try something else. And they just didn't. They didn't try to just enter the zone. They didn't try, different methods of getting the puck deep. Instead of wrapping it around the boards, trying to park it in the corner where, Wolf can't go out and get it. Thank you very much, Marty Brodeur. That's what that's for, right? He's not supposed to go there. I think that was a major element in this game for the Canadiens, is just how frustrating Dustin Wolf was, not only in front of his net, but behind it. He was knocking pucks out of the air behind the net to stop the Canadiens from getting set up. That's a challenge that the Canadiens are going to need to overcome. There are a lot of great goalies in this league who can do that. It's pretty easy if you are a goalie who can play the puck like Dustin Wolf to be able to just shut a team's offense down before it even gets started. So to me, that was a really big aspect of this game that I don't know we're really looking at all that much. However, another part of this game, we'll bring it back to the Canadiens on this one. Lane Hutson, again, phenomenal game from the rookie defender who, it's always been him and Celebrini for the Calder, and that's how it's going to end up. It's one of those two players. I think Michkov has not played up to the level of those two. But again, just like even on a game where they don't score at all, he's still a story.
I think so. It is kind of disappointing that he didn't get a point because of the race, right? Him and Nick Suzuki, they're going to have to pick it up against Vancouver and Seattle, which I know we're going to talk about tomorrow in our weekly forecast. But I just think that anytime he's on the ice, it's exciting, right? Anytime you watch, it's a masterclass. And this guy is just in his first season. I can't even begin to think of like what he's going to look like with, 3 years of NHL experience under his belt or some playoff experience under his belt. It's going to be incredible. Like, and this is the growing pain season, right? Like this is the welcome to the league kid season. And it's incredible. And I just, we always joke about, is there anything this guy can't do? I think that there are very, very few things. I think the only thing he can't do really is be tall.
That's true. He's never going to be 6 feet tall, and it doesn't seem to stop him from doing the things he wants to do. Laura, since you're on the other side of the screen, and because I thought he had a nice game, I want to give you the opportunity to give your grade on the mic meter. Yes, let's do the mic meter, because I know because you're over there. There you go.
Right. So I don't know if you can see it. I'm at a 4.
Okay, 4. Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought he was again really, really great.
Yeah.
It's funny since since coming back from Four Nations, he's played really well, and everybody is silent about it, which is really upsetting because he's a guy that takes a beating on social media and in the regular media when he has a bad game, and he's been excellent over the last stretch, and nobody has said a thing. And I find that to be very disappointing. And
Oh,
it's
they're still
why
trying
we
to trade
have
him.
this meter. It's why the meter exists, is not so we can pick on him, so we can also tell people, hey, he was really great. And if you didn't notice that, that's on you. So Mike, again, a 4. He could have been Magic Mike had they found a way to pick up any points and he was involved in them. But a 4 is still a very strong showing from Mr. Mike Matheson. All right. We'll leave the Calgary game there. We will time travel back to Friday and talk about the Canadiens' action and, I mean, mostly inaction at the NHL trade deadline, and we'll get into that in just a minute. Looking for a snack that's both delicious and nutritious? Crack into a good source of protein with Wonderful Pistachios. Wonderful Pistachios is one of the highest protein nuts. Each 1 ounce serving has 6 grams of protein, giving you over 10% of your daily value. Plus, they're packed with fiber and better for you unsaturated fats to help keep you feeling fuller longer. Personally, I love the no shells variety. It's the perfect grab and go snack for busy days. Whether I'm at my desk or on a road trip, just need a quick protein boost. They are always my go-to. Especially, I like the different varieties of no shells. The chili roasted version, the salt and vinegar. Those are really, really great alternatives to the pistachio. And plus, if you love cracking open every shell for that satisfying crunch, don't worry. We still have you covered. We haven't forgotten about you. The in-shell options are always a classic favorite. Get snacking and cracking with the snack that packs a protein punch. Visit wonderfulpistachios.com to learn more. All right, we are back. And so are everybody who was on the Montreal Canadiens on Thursday. They are also back still with the Montreal Canadiens. Kent Hughes, actually, what's funny, them and Calgary made 0 trades on trade deadline day. So it's very interesting that they played each other. And they're sort of in very similar situations, come to think of it. Montreal doesn't do anything. Listeners of this show, and I mean, generally just people who have paid attention to this team all year, saw this coming, right? There wasn't going to be much happening because over the last week, the Canadiens have stepped it up and they've played pretty well, and they haven't given Kent Hughes a reason to sell. Where are you at on that decision? Because I think across the fan base, there's a bit of a different vibe. It's people are not understanding exactly, that why they did what they did on Friday.
So I'm seeing a lot of, the Canadiens miss their chance at this player, that player, or this other player. Out of all of the players who actually moved, right? How many did the Canadiens actually have a chance to get? And how many of them did we want? I mean, Mikko Rantanen, I'm all for it, right?
Yeah.
There was no chance Montreal was getting him, right?
No, and I believe Elliot Friedman had that Montreal, he said, wouldn't be surprised if the Habs at least looked into Mikko Rantanen.
Right,
So
because
they were in it.
It does make sense. It is a fit, right? That is a desirable player. And then Dylan Cousins kind of maybe, right? Yes, he's a good player, and yes, it would be great to keep him out of Ottawa, but that didn't happen, right?
Yeah.
But other than that, were there any players that actually moved that the Montreal Canadiens should have gone for? I don't know that there are any really. How many of them would have fit, and how many of them would have fit the long term, right? Because we're not talking about Montreal doesn't care about the short term right now. It would be very easy to pick somebody up as a trade deadline acquisition and then try to make the playoffs. But what would be the point? You would have to let go of something you don't necessarily want to let go of. And they're all, everyone was saying that this year the goal was to be in the mix. It's next year that we get to say, why aren't you in the playoffs? It's next year where, it's the off season. And also something that I don't know if it was you that pointed this out, Ian, Kent Hughes makes his big moves in the off season anyway.
Yeah.
Right.
No, I believe that was the other man in our group chat, Scott, mentioned that to us. And he's right. That
the other co-host in my life.
Kent Hughes works best when the sun is out. That's what what we've grown to know from him. He doesn't do a lot of his deals in season. Yeah. And the ones that he has made have been like the Toffoli trade. We don't have to trade him. We don't have to trade him. Shutout, where he said the same thing, even though that was a lie. Lehkonen, where that one wasn't a lie, but he did say we don't need to trade him over and over again. He does his best work in the summer. If there was something here that made sense for the Canadiens, they would have done it, right?
Yes.
It's not,
or they would have tried to do it.
Right. And Kent Hughes did mention in his press conference after the fact that they did have some conversations about adding things, that can help them long term. And they've sort of planted the seeds for those now, and they'll revisit them over the summer, and they'll try to get something done once they are allowed to. I think people looked at him standing pat and they got mad in the sense that, he has to pick a lane. He needs to either sell or buy. And that's just not true, because the action of doing neither shows that he's putting trust in this group. He's putting trust in the core of this team. By not selling, that's obvious, right? I think that you guys can make a run at a playoff spot. I'm not going to get rid of these guys because they're going to be helpful for you guys to get to where you want to be.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not buying because, it's a bit of a, we don't want to waste the assets now. We believe you're going to be better next year, or in the years after, where those assets will be better spent. But also, we believe in you. We believe you'll be able to go out and get this team at least to a playoff spot. And I know people are thinking like, well, is that the goal now? Just playoffs, and there's no bigger picture. If that's the belief that you have not been paying attention. Like, I don't mean to be like rude to people, but some of the takes I saw on Friday and into the weekend were just completely untethered from reality. Like, we've been paying attention to this team all year. How you should not be shocked by what you saw on Friday.
When we before the season started, or early in the season, when we said the Canadiens could challenge for a playoff spot, people laughed at us. And now they're angry because that's where they are, right? So I think that we really need to temper our expectations, but also we need to understand what a rebuild is, right? You don't want to be stuck in the Buffalo zone. You absolutely don't want to be doing that, and looking at Boston right now, Boston definitely sold, definitely has given up. Do you trust the people in charge in Boston right now to come up with a rebuild as good as the one the Canadiens one is looking like?
Yeah.
Right?
No, I don't. Like, that's a tough sell. Boston sold. That's a great example of a team around where Montreal is in the standings, making their decision. But their teams on different trajectories. Boston is very clearly on the way down, big picture, and Montreal's on the way up, big picture.
Yeah.
A lot of the other teams around them, like Columbus, didn't do much. The Wings made some weird moves that a lot of people don't really seem to understand. I think Yzerman is starting to lose people in Detroit on the Yzer plan.
Yes.
So I think this always made sense for the Canadiens. We've now seen 3 trade deadlines from Kent Hughes, and this has been the story most of the time.
Yeah.
When
they sold, they really sold, though. Like, that was the thing.
Yeah.
That year they sold a lot.
Yep. I do think this is the last boring trade deadline we're going to get, though. If I can be honest, like, next year, they're either in a playoff spot and they're adding for a big run, or they're not, and they're making deals because they're not satisfied with where their team is.
Right.
So, like, I think this is going to be the last boring one of these. So don't get used to what you saw on Friday. I don't think that's going to be the reality for this team moving forward.
Yes, and I want to go back real quick to what you were talking about, picking a lane. Either you're buying or selling. Like, also, neither of those is also a lane. It is also a choice, right?
Yep.
And the choice that's being made here is, I'm not going to mortgage the future on what I think is a short playoff run that we're lucky to get if we get it, and is going to be magnificent for the development of these players. But if we don't get it, it's not like it's a disappointment, and we shouldn't be disappointed. So no, I'm not mortgaging the future on that. But the other thing too is, like, I'm not selling these things, because what kind of a message am I sending to this team? I remember, Mark Bergevin saying something along the lines of, if you want loyalty, get a dog. Now, he was talking about players. He wasn't talking about himself, right?
Yeah.
But in this case, like, the front office is showing that they're also giving this team loyalty. Like, they're putting their money where their mouth is. Like, they are solidifying everything that they're doing. Is they're saying, we want to be a good franchise to play. We want to be one of the top employers in the NHL. We want to be somewhere people want to go. There's a lot. There's the pressure of this market, the insanity of its fan base, the taxes that everyone never stops talking about, the French language schooling that your kids are going to have to do, but you're rich, you can put them in private school, it's fine. all of that stuff that people are talking about. The organization itself, though, wants to be a destination, and this is how they do it. They're honest. They reward their players. And Patrick Laine was a reward, right? Keeping this team together was a reward. Keeping Jake Evans was a reward, right? Like,
Yep.
this player proved that he's going to be instrumental in the bottom six of the future of this team when they're contending, right? Like, everything about this is a choice that they're making. They're not missing out. They're not, it's not like they offered up nothing and then, got laughed off the phone by other GMs. They
Yep.
simply looked at what was available. They probably made some calls, asked some questions, fielded some offers for sure. But then they decided this was the way that they were going to go. And I think, we have to have some faith in the organization that has brought us Demidov. We have to have some faith in the organization that, that brought Patrick Laine, but also selected Lane Hudson. That too, we have to look at all these choices that they're making, and overall they're positives. So, we can't keep being disappointed when we can't keep looking for reasons to be disappointed. That's what I want to say.
Yeah, look, none of the deals that happened made a lot of sense if you're the Montreal Canadiens. Like you look at the deal that brought Dylan Cousins to Ottawa. To get Dylan Cousins, does Montreal have a Josh Norris? People will say Kirby Dach. Kirby Dach is not Josh Norris. Like, we just have to be completely honest with ourselves. Jacob Bernard Docker, do we have them? Maybe, but would Montreal want to be parting ways with that player? Again, I think people they want trades for the sake of trades. That's not how Kent Hughes operates. Before we head into our final segment, I do just want to read a quote from Kent Hughes from his trade deadline press. He was talking about back at Tremblant in September, where the team meets as their team building exercise. He said, "For the first time since I've been in Montreal, we didn't have an established plan at the start of the season, and their play would have a say in what we do. So today and this week, in a sense, we rewarded them for their effort. This is not us or fans or media extrapolating what we think happened. This is the promise that Kent Hughes made to this team. It was a promise made and a promise kept. And if you're a player, that's the stuff you love to see." So from that perspective, the Canadiens won at the trade deadline because they didn't do anything dumb, and they made the players believe that front office believes in them, which matters a great deal. All right, we need to head into our final segment where we will recap the entire week for the Montreal Canadiens, as there were 3 games and also some players that may make their return to Montreal in some capacity in the near future, and we'll get into that in just a minute. Looking to optimize your nutrition this year? Factor makes eating well easy with chef-prepared, dietitian-approved meals that are fresh, never frozen, and ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes. With 40 options across 8 dietary preferences each week, you can customize your meals to fit your lifestyle. Whether it's Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto Plus, Factor even offers wholesome smoothies, breakfast, and grab-and-go snacks to keep you fueled all day long. I love how Factor takes the stress out of meal planning. When I was fully working from home, I found I was leaning towards really unhealthy options. I for lunch, I was just having things delivered, not very healthy choices that I was putting in front of myself. Factor, on the other hand, I really enjoyed the quality, the variety of options. It was very much more, health centered for, a really easy lunch for me. The convenience is unbeatable. No prep, no mess, just great food in minutes. Eat smart with Factor. Get started with factormeals.com/LockedOnNHL50 off and use code LockedOnNHL50 off to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code LockedOnNHL50 off at factormeals.com/LockedOnNHL50 off to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. All right, we are back, and it's time for our weekly recap. A perfectly 500 week for the Montreal Canadiens. 1-1-1, a 4-3 overtime win against Buffalo, a 3-2 overtime loss in Edmonton, and a 1-0 loss in Calgary. Currently, they are 2 points out of a wild card spot. However, that is as we were recording this, although that has changed since we started recording this, because Columbus and New York played each other on Sunday. So that gap will be 4 points regardless of what the outcome of that game was, although Columbus was beating the brakes off of the Rangers. So take of that what you will. And also the Red Wings and the Senators play on Monday, which further complicates the Canadiens' ability to get back into the mix. This week, they just didn't pick up the points that we needed them to pick up. Is the mix in jeopardy after a week like this, Laura?
I don't think we can say it's in jeopardy because I think we're going to be dancing this dance for the next month and a bit. Like I think there's 1 month and 1 week left in the season. It ends on April 16th, if I'm not mistaken. So there's still a lot of time to go. There's still a lot of games in that schedule. There's, this week is going to be amazing because we have 2 back-to-back 10:30 starts in a row against teams that the Canadiens should really beat. I think that, so it's not in jeopardy after this week, but if they lose all the games this week, then we have to ask questions. And we're going to do our weekly forecast next tomorrow in our next episode. There's some tough games coming up, but I think the Canadiens won 5 in a row before they had that overtime loss, and they played really well against Edmonton, and they played well for portions of the game against Calgary. It's not like it was an abject disaster. It was just, you pointed it out in our game recap, like, a lot of Dustin Wolf, a lot of inconsistency throughout the game, Patrick Laine missing, all of that. So I don't think that the mix is in jeopardy. I think it's just harder now, but things will happen to other teams too. So.
Yep. No, it's true. I think it's just an artifact of how the Canadian schedule works most of the time. If you're a veteran Canadiens fan, you know that they play Saturday nights. Their next game is most of the time Tuesday, and then Thursday, Saturday again on a standard week for the Canadiens. So they played Saturday, they lost. Sunday, 2 teams that they're chasing played each other. Monday, 2 teams that they are chasing are playing each other. It's just it was a perfect storm for the Canadiens. Needed more out of Saturday's game because they knew that getting help from the rest of the standings was not going to be possible the next few days. By the way, people who have listened to the show will know that I'm not a big scoreboard watching guy. That's certainly changed a little bit, but I'm not hand-wringing over these games that the Canadiens are not playing in because my philosophy is simple. Just shut up and win the games you have to play. Yeah. It doesn't matter. The Canadiens are behind. They do not control their own destiny, so to speak.
So they have to win.
Win anyway. Win anyway. Whether you get the help or not, it won't matter if you don't win. So just go win the games. It's that simple for Montreal. One guy that could come back potentially and help them win games, Kaiden Guhle, who skated in full gear in Brossard at the practice facility on trade deadline day. No, the Canadiens wisely have not given us any kind of timetable for his return. However, he looked like he was moving pretty good. Yeah, I think it's just a matter of time for Kaiden Guhle. Tomorrow we want to talk about who comes out of the lineup should Kaiden Guhle return, because there's a couple options and I don't really like any of them. So we'll have to figure out what we think there. But also on trade deadline day, we learned that Oliver Kapanen, when his season is done with Timrå, he will come over and play for the Laval Rocket. We wanted them to add to the Rocket via trade. Turns out they don't need to because Oliver Kapanen is going to come over and play for the Laval Rocket at the end of the year. Do you think that's a sufficient add for a team like Laval?
I think that, and then once the Canadiens are eliminated from either potentially being in the playoffs or from the playoffs, whoever is left that can still go gets sent down, and that'll be sufficient addition. I believe it's Owen Beck, right?
Owen Beck and Jakub Dobeš can go down. Yeah. Owen Beck and Jakub Dobeš got papered on Friday, so they'll both be eligible for the Calder Cup playoffs.
How could I forget Jakub Dobeš?
Yeah, of course. I mean, because he just seems like an NHLer. He was excellent on Saturday night in Calgary. It seems weird that they're going to send him back to the AHL, but it makes sense. If something were to happen to Caden Primo, they'd have another 1A option for the net in Laval, which is just not a lot of teams can stunt that if the Canadiens have to go that route, or should I say, if the Rocket have to go that route to the playoffs. So yeah, Eddie, anything else from the week that you want to touch on before we move into our trivia here?
Nick Suzuki's awesome. Lane Hutson's awesome. Cole Caulfield is awesome.
Yeah, the guys that you want to see carrying this team are carrying this team, right? Mm-hmm. It's awesome. Yeah, it's really great to see.
Yes.
Cool. All right, let's do our trivia and then head out of here. We have 2 follow the player pass. Yesterday, or the one over the weekend, was Edmonton, New York Islanders, Anaheim, Minnesota, Montreal, Tampa Bay, Carolina. Do you know the answer to this one, Laura?
The answer to this one is Marc-Andre Bergeron. We've been talking about doing this when we first decided to do trivia. He was at the top of the list for one of the some guys. And we finally get to do it.
Yeah, no, that was a cool a cool run because when that was the playoff year that they knocked off Washington and Pittsburgh in the same playoff, and he was very much a power play specialist where he didn't play much at 5-on-5, and the Canadiens drew a power play, and they were like, just get it to Bergeron, and he's just going to hammer it from the point. That's a fun player, man.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. That was Super Rain who had that one right first. So congrats to Super Rain on that one. Today's player path: Philadelphia, Montreal, Washington, Buffalo, New Jersey Devils, San Jose Sharks. Philly, Montreal, Washington, Buffalo, New Jersey Devils, San Jose Sharks. If you have the answer to that, put it down in the comments or send it to us any way you know how. There's a lot of ways you can reach us. You can find us on Bluesky or Instagram, TikTok, anywhere where we can post things. You will find us at Locked On Canadiens, lockedoncanadiens@gmail.com as well. Thanks for making Locked On Canadiens your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out Locked On NHL podcast, bringing you the daily league-wide stories that matter with the local coverage you love from Locked On. Find Locked On NHL on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcasts. You can find me at Maybe It's Ian. You can find Laura at The Active Stick. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we will see you guys tomorrow.